Day 43. The Dorado hit the spear sideways. One violent twist of its body and the metal tip dragged across the bottom tube of the raft. Stephen Callahan heard the sound before he understood it. A ripping, a hiss, and then the ocean pushing up through a 4-inch gash in the rubber floor beneath him. 1,500 miles from the nearest land. 800 miles from the shipping lanes he had already passed through. The raft was sinking, and Callahan had a sponge, a strip of sleeping bag lining, and 50 feet of rope to stop it. He was 30 years old. A naval architect from Massachusetts who had designed and built his own sailboat, a 21-foot sloop called Napoleon Solo. He had entered a solo transatlantic race, dropped out after bad weather damaged the fleet, and set off alone from the Canary Islands on January 29, 1982, bound for Antigua. 7 days out, something struck the hull in the middle of the night. Callahan believes it was a whale. The impact punched a hole through the boat that no repair could fix. Within minutes, the cabin was flooding. He had seconds, not minutes, to make the decision that would determine whether he lived or drowned. He chose the Raft. A 6-person Avon inflatable, barely 6 feet across, with an orange canopy and a floor so thin he could feel the ocean pressing against his spine. But Callahan did not just jump and drift. While Napoleon Solo was still partially afloat, held up by the watertight compartments he had built into the hull, he dove back into the flooding cabin. 3 times. Each dive deeper as the water rose. He pulled out a sleeping bag. A cushion. An emergency kit containing flares, a flashlight, navigation charts, a short spear gun, 3 solar stills for producing drinking water, and a survival manual. He grabbed the food that floated to the surface. A box of eggs and a single head of cabbage. Before dawn, a breaking wave tore the raft's tether from the sinking boat. Napoleon Solo disappeared beneath the surface. Callahan was alone on the Atlantic, 800 miles west of the Canary Islands, with enough food and water for 14 days. 14 days. He rationed immediately. Half a pint of water per day. A few bites of cabbage. 1 egg. He knew the math, and the math was brutal. The trade winds and the south equatorial current would push him west toward the Caribbean, but the Caribbean was 1,800 nautical miles away. At the raft's drift speed, that meant months, not weeks. 14 days of supplies. Months of ocean. The gap between those two numbers was where Callahan would either find a way or die. The solar stills were his first crisis. 3 balloon-like devices designed to evaporate seawater using sunlight and collect the condensation as drinkable water. He had never used one. He did not know how they worked. So he cut one open. Took it apart. Studied the membranes, the collection chambers, the way the salt was supposed to separate from the vapor. Then he rigged the remaining 2 and waited. The first day they produced almost nothing. The second day, a few ounces. By the end of the first week, he had coaxed roughly a pint of fresh water per day from the pair of them. 1 pint. The human body loses more than that through breathing alone in tropical heat. Callahan was slowly dehydrating from the moment he boarded the raft, and 1 pint per day was the difference between dying in 10 days and dying in 90. Around day 10, the ocean offered something unexpected. Fish began gathering beneath the raft. First the triggerfish, armored, colorful, bitter-fleshed. He speared one on day 13 and wept. Not because it tasted good. It did not. He wept because it meant the ocean was not just trying to kill him. It was also, in its indifferent way, keeping him alive. Then the Dorado came. A school of 50, 20 pounds each, brilliant blue and gold, circling the raft like satellites orbiting a planet. They were beautiful. He would later write that watching them leap 3 feet out of the water was one of the only moments of joy in those first weeks. And then he learned to kill them. The spear gun's firing mechanism broke within days. Callahan pulled the spear free and began jabbing by hand, leaning over the raft's edge with his arm and the water up to the shoulder, waiting for a Dorado to drift close enough. The fish learned the range of his spear within 24 hours and began circling just outside of it. He had to be patient. Absolutely still. One thrust, one chance. He ate the flesh raw. The organs he squeezed for moisture. The eyes he swallowed whole. Nothing was wasted. His body demanded 500 calories a day to maintain basic function. A single Dorado gave him roughly 800. On the days he caught one, he lived. On the days he did not, his body consumed itself. Muscle first, then fat, then the reserves that keep organs functioning. He spoke to himself starting on day 4. Not ramblings. Orders. A daily briefing delivered to no one. Water first. Then shelter. Then signal. Stay in order. Do not skip ahead. Every morning, the same 3 words. He kept a detailed log, position estimates using a makeshift sextant he built from 2 pencils, weather observations, resource inventories. The log was not sentiment. It was structure. It was the difference between a man surviving and a man waiting to die. The ships appeared like mirages, except they were real. He spotted 9 over the course of his drift. 2 passed within a mile. He could see the hull paint, the deck railings. He fired flares. Waved the signal mirror until his arms burned. Screamed until his throat cracked. The ships kept moving. The ocean makes a man very small, and radar does not detect a 6-foot rubber circle riding 2 inches above the waterline. After the 7th ship passed without stopping, Callahan made a decision that defined the rest of his survival. He stopped waiting for rescue. He stopped scanning the horizon for smokestacks. He told himself, with the cold clarity of a man who has accepted the math, that no one was coming. Whatever happened next was between him and the ocean. At 2 a.m. on day 35, he woke to water lapping over his legs. The lower tube had softened, a slow leak he could not locate in the dark. He spent the rest of the night pumping, one hand on the bellows, the other feeling along the seams for the breach. By morning he found it, a tiny abrasion where a shark's skin had scraped the rubber. He patched it with material from his repair kit. It held. For 8 more days it held. Then came day 43. March 15th. The Dorado that destroyed everything. Callahan had speared it cleanly, but the fish thrashed with a force he had not anticipated. The spear tip, still embedded in the fish, slashed across the bottom tube and opened a 4-inch wound in the rubber. The Atlantic pushed through immediately. Within seconds the lower compartment, the one that kept his body, his stills, his supplies above the waterline, began collapsing. His legs sank into the ocean. Salt water soaked the sleeping bag, the charts, everything. He worked for 10 days to save the raft. 10 days of constant pumping, hundreds of strokes per hour, hour after hour, while the gash hissed and bubbled and refused to seal. He stuffed the hole with sponge. Packed sleeping bag lining around it. Lashed it tight with rope. The patch reduced the leak but could not stop it. From day 43 onward, Callahan lived in a raft that was perpetually sinking. The floor sagged. His body sat in 6 inches of seawater at all times. The salt ate into the sores that already covered his legs, his back, his hands. Every position, sitting, kneeling, lying down, was pain. There was no dry surface left. There was no comfort of any kind. Day 50 was the lowest point. He had lost 1/3 of his body weight. His fishing spear was broken. The solar stills, waterlogged and battered, were producing less each day. He lay on the deflated floor of the raft and thought about giving up. Not dramatically. Quietly. Just stopping. Letting the pumping schedule slip, letting the leak take the raft, letting the ocean finish what it had started 43 days ago. He lay there for what felt like hours. And then he did not give up. He went through his gear. Every piece, every fragment, every scrap of rope and rubber and metal. He lashed a knife blade to the broken spear shaft and made a new weapon. He repositioned the stills. He tightened the patch. He pumped. He caught a triggerfish that afternoon, bitter, tough, barely 300 calories. He ate it and kept pumping. The nights were the hardest and the most beautiful. The Atlantic sky, unpolluted by any light for 1,000 miles in every direction, was so dense with stars it looked solid. The Milky Way was not a smear but a structure, a bridge of light arcing from horizon to horizon. Callahan would lie on the sagging floor of his disintegrating raft, soaking in seawater, body wrecked, and stare straight up into a sky that did not care whether he lived or died but was astonishing anyway. He would later describe those nights as a view of heaven from a seat in hell. The Dorado never left him. Even after one of them had nearly killed him, the school stayed. 50 fish circling the raft day and night, disappearing at dawn to feed, returning by afternoon. They brushed against the underside of the raft as they slept. Callahan could feel them through the thin rubber, smooth, muscular bodies gliding beneath him. They were his food source, his constant threat, and the only other living company he had for 76 days. He began to think of them not as prey but as neighbors. An ecosystem had formed around his raft. Barnacles on the bottom attracted small fish attracted triggerfish attracted Dorado attracted the sharks that circled at the edges. Callahan was the reluctant mayor of a floating city he had never wanted to build. By day 70, the stills had failed completely. His last reliable water source was gone. He rigged makeshift rain catchers from every scrap of material he had, the canopy, the repair patches, plastic sheeting. When it rained, he caught what he could. When it did not rain, he squeezed fish organs and drank the fluid inside. On day 74, he had 3 cans of water left. 3 cans. Maybe 2 days. If Stephen Callahan's story sounds like something that should not have been survivable, you are right. It should not have been. 76 days on a deflating raft with a hole in the bottom, eating raw fish and drinking condensation in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If that story does not deserve to be heard, nothing does. Subscribe, because the ocean has more secrets than you think. The evening of April 20th. Day 75. Callahan was lying on his back, too weak to sit up for more than a few minutes at a time, when he saw lights. Not stars. Not phosphorescence. Steady electrical lights on a dark horizon. Land. Marie Galante, a small island southeast of Guadeloupe. 1,500 miles from where Napoleon's Solo had sunk. He had drifted 1,800 nautical miles across the Atlantic Ocean on a raft the size of a dining table. He did not sleep that night. He watched the lights, and he pumped the raft, and he talked to himself in a voice he barely recognized. By morning, the island was 10 miles away. He could see green. Actual green, trees, hills, vegetation. Colors that had not existed in his world for over 2 months. He began wrapping himself in plastic sheeting, preparing for the possibility that the raft might tear apart on the coral reefs before he reached shore. But it was the birds that saved him. Frigate birds. They had spotted the Dorado school circling beneath his raft, and began diving above him, their silhouettes sharp against the morning sky. 3 fishermen from a neighboring island, men who had never fished the windward side of Marie Galante, saw the birds and followed them. They were not looking for a survivor. They were looking for fish. The engine sound reached him before he saw the boat. A low rumble cutting through the wind. Callahan pulled himself upright for the first time in days. 3 men in a wooden fishing boat, staring at him like he was something the ocean had coughed up. He was. He tried to yell, but his voice came out as a whisper. They pulled alongside. One of the fishermen reached down and grabbed his arm. The grip was warm. It was the first human touch Stephen Callahan had felt in 76 days. He weighed 40 pounds less than the man who had boarded Napoleon's Solo 11 weeks earlier. His body was covered in saltwater sores. His legs could not hold him upright. But he was breathing. He was alive. And somewhere beneath the raft, 50 Dorados circled once more, and then, for the first time in 76 days, swam away. This story is based on real events. Some details, dialogue, and scenes have been dramatized for narrative purposes.